Simon, GlaxoSmithKline has confirmed today that Andrew Witty will stand down as CEO next year. How would you assess the 8 years he has spent in this role, and what legacy will he leave?
Well, Matt, I think there's a few things to consider. He assumed the role of CEO at a particularly challenging time. Just 12 months earlier, Glaxo's diabetes treatment Avandia, which at the time was a multi-billion-dollar product, was linked to increased cardiovascular risk, and over the next few years, sales of the drug plummeted. So at a time when the company was not particularly exposed to generic competition, like many of its rivals, this provided a significant and unexpected headwind to top-line performance. But while that was an unfortunate event which the company could really do nothing about, I think one of the key legacies will be how Glaxo's R&D pipeline has evolved. Prior to his appointment, expectations had been set very high on the back of Glaxo instigating a major reorganisation of its R&D structure. But the reality is that while new product approval rates have steadily improved in recent years, the drugs which the company has brought to the market have not really delivered in terms of the revenues which were expected. And this is encapsulated best by the very long road to market for products such as Breo and Anoro in the respiratory space. Not only do these drugs offer only incremental benefit over what's already available, but US payers in particular have become much more stringent in the coverage that they're willing to provide and the price they're willing to pay for these drugs. A marked contrast to the stratospheric performance of Glaxo's Advair franchise, which was launched a decade earlier. I think another issue that's worth noting is how Glaxo markets its products, and it's often cited that the company is less aggressive than rival companies, given previous indiscretions in the US market. Back in 2012, GSK paid the largest healthcare fraud settlement in US history, a $3 billion fine, which related to promotion of certain drugs in off-label uses and the allegation that it held back safety data relating to Avandia. It also became embroiled in a bribery scandal in China 2 years ago. The fine it had to pay was notably smaller, but it was a pretty embarrassing situation for all involved, with Witty essentially asked to apologise to the Chinese public.
And of course the respiratory market, one from which other companies are scaling back their investment or even exiting altogether, still remains central to GlaxoSmithKline's outlook?
Glaxo is a company that sticks to what it knows best. When Witty took over, the respiratory and infectious disease portfolios dominated its outlook, and to a certain extent they still do. The asset swap deal it did with Novartis, which strengthened Glaxo's vaccine business, shows a commitment to these therapy areas. Witty has received some criticism for selling the company's oncology portfolio to Novartis as part of that deal, at a time when most other big pharma companies are ploughing investment into this therapy area and major breakthroughs are occurring. I suppose one area where the company has had success is in reviving its HIV franchise, but there are two things to consider here. The company did lose its market-leading position in HIV to Gilead over the past decade, and just a year ago management was touting this business as a unit which could be partially IPO'd. That decision's now been reversed, and today the business looks integral to GSK's longer-term growth.
You mentioned criticism. There's been some push for GlaxoSmithKline to realign its strategic focus and possibly break up. This investor tension had ultimately led to speculation that Witty may depart sooner rather than later.
Well, with Witty now confirmed to be leaving next year, and 4 members of Glaxo's board not expected to seek re-election, there's certainly going to be speculation as to whether a shake-up or break-up will occur. At times over the past 6 months in particular, Witty's decision to focus on the more secure but perhaps less exciting vaccine and consumer markets has gained some credibility at times as scrutiny of drug price sustainability, for example, has increased. But it's also tempting to view Glaxo as being in a similar position to, say, AstraZeneca a few years ago, a company which could perhaps be doing better in terms of delivering major new drugs to the market and which could be revived by new leadership. It's worth remembering that Glaxo has one of the broadest early stage pipelines in the sector, so there is something for new management to work with. The challenge of managing a big pharma company should not be underestimated, and Witty has undoubtedly delivered focus following the merger of Glaxo Wellcome and SmithKline Beecham in 2000. A 22% increase in share price since his appointment does, however, position Glaxo as the weakest performing European large cap over this period, and it's perhaps telling that many shareholders now want the company to turn full circle and consider splitting up.